So at Hopr, we work on privacy. We think that privacy is one of the core underlying drivers that makes the Web3 great. We work on transport privacy, so bringing data from A to B. A lot of people talk about on-chain privacy, and we complement that with transport privacy. So Hopr is really the underlying infrastructure of peer-to-peer networks. So, whatever peer-to-peer network you connect to, we're typically sending data, right? So one typical example, and that's actually something we focus on right now, is between your Ethereum wallet and, an RPC provider, for example, or your own node, right? That's an example of a typical connection that we have in these networks. And that is leaking data. So for example, when you connect from, let's say you use MetaMask, like most of us do, and you're connecting to an RPC provider, like for example Infura, they can data harvest you. They can data harvest your IP address, and by means of your IP address, link all your various accounts. And that's not cool, because that is undermining the values of self-custodial money and empowerment of the individual, which is really what Web3 is all about. So we try to bring more privacy to that, to have defensible self-custodial money and data. People sometimes talk about decentralization as if that is, a goal in and by itself, but I don't think it is. I think crypto is really about empowerment of the individual. What we need to get there is censorship resistance. But to actually have defensible censorship resistance, we need decentralization of power and privacy guarantees. And I think it's very important. And we contribute that on a bottommost layer of the stack on this peer-to-peer layer with Hopr. MEV is today a very limited game. So it's a game where the players only look at the tip of the iceberg, which is the mempool of pending transactions. But, if we think about it, let's imagine, this whole game is successful. Let's imagine this whole giant experiment of Ethereum and blockchains in general is successful, and we have hedge funds coming in with trillion-dollar assets. They're going to laugh at us for just looking at this tiny amount of data that is the mempool. And they will data harvest everything they can in order to make more profits. Because if it's a trillion-dollar game, then, you're going to play nastier moves. And that is going to be data harvesting. So today's MEV game on the mempool is just a prelude to this much bigger game of data harvesting. And the only defense is strong privacy tech. So for example, if you are a hedge fund that stands to make or lose a ton of money, you would certainly look at transport data information, see, okay, I see your IP address is active, I see you're going to do something, I will try to find out as much as I can about you on this most bottom layer in the stack. It's actually even worse than just looking at transactions. So if you think about peer-to-peer networks, and think about kind of a YOLO decentralized future, we're going to see, front ends being loaded through IPFS and ENS, right? So I see what resources you are loading. And data is being loaded from networks such as the graph, right? And in a properly decentralized graph network, I will be able to tell what you're querying, right? And I will use that against you. We will have decentralized RPC providers such as Pocket, right? And I will use that information also against you. So all truly decentralized networks have a much bigger privacy problem than centralized infrastructure. That's something that I think very few people talk about, and that needs being addressed on multiple layers in the stack. So Hopr is general purpose data transfer technology, and you can use it for anything. You can build a private chat app with Hopr. You can build a private IoT app with Hopr. But what we are focusing on right now is really middleware between wallets and RPC providers. And we call that RPCH, which stands for RPC over Hopr. What it allows you to do, and this thing is live right now, you can play around with it, is it routes all your requests to an RPC provider via the Hopr mixnet. So data packets are hopping around. So instead of me sending it to Infura directly, I would send it to Alice, who sends it to Bob, who sends it to Charlie, who sends it to Infura. So Infura doesn't see me, cannot data harvest me, and cannot link my accounts. That's how we work together with some of the players in the space, including decentralized RPC providers such as Pocket. I personally believe in decentralization. I really enjoy seeing that Pocket, but also actually Infura with their DIN decentralized infrastructure network is working in that direction. And we want to bring the privacy to make that safe. Basically, there's an argument to be made that, people are just lazy. Is every one of us running their own node? The answer is no. Never will every Ethereum user run their own node. So, there's this argument of leaning in and thinking, how can we make this less problematic? And that is by taking away power for them to deliver us arbitrary data. And great progress has been made since the merge. which brought us light client verification. So I can ask you for proof that proves that, the balance that you just delivered to me is correct. And the second one is actually preventing data harvesting. If these two things are met, then our problem with centralized providers is not so big. So yes, it is totally possible for Infura to not just offer their RPC endpoints via HTTPS and WebSocket, but also via Hopr. And that's what we're working towards. There is something that we call safe staking, and I think it's worth briefly talking about, which is security in separating, operating a node and managing funds. Traditional staking of ETH is a quite advanced field. When we talk about tokens, token staking infrastructure, it is lacking way behind. There's fewer projects, there's way less innovation, and it's way less safe to stake tokens. We try to change that by building token staking infrastructure that is separating the work of operating a node, which is online 24/7, from securing assets, which is really like, you should keep that as offline as possible. So what we've been building is a module for Safe, the multi-sig that some people know as Gnosis Safe, that does exactly that. So you can have some capabilities that you set in your node, which is operating software. In our case, it is for relaying data. Other examples are Gelato for automation, for maybe Tornado Cash for relaying transactions and other services, or like the graph indexers. And we allow them to run this software and separate that from managing funds, and thereby allowing it, especially for home stakers, to stake safely without having to fear that somebody runs away with my dApp node from my home and all my money is gone. So I think that's an important contribution to make token staking safe. So I think staking infrastructure has been growing through tremendous innovation cycles. I'm very surprised how quickly decentralized validator tech and restaking actually appeared. Like just a year ago, that sounded absolutely crazy. Like that is not going to happen. And now it seems like all of that is around the corner. I personally see that like Ethereum staking is kind of fine and very mature. I see that there will be more innovation being seen on the token staking infrastructure side. So, if we think about token staking projects, let's take, for example, the graph as an example. There's no restaking for the graph, right? There's no liquid staking for the graph. Like, I think the innovation that we see in the ETH staking side will migrate over to the token staking side, and I have the feeling there's a bunch of business opportunity in that space that people should just go for to make everyone's life easier and safer. So I find restaking fascinating. At the same time, I'm still a little bit curious as to what the applications end of the day really going to be. So I feel I have a little bit of flashback to when tokens appeared, like before DeFi summer. So we had tokens for a while. We had this whole ICO craziness, and we didn't really know what would tokens be used for. And then DeFi summer came, we're like, okay, you can use tokens in DEXs, you can use tokens as collateral for lending markets. And I have the feeling, restaking is a bit in that state that we see we can do it, we see it can do a lot of things, but we don't understand what exactly we can do with it. And I'm very much looking forward to where we are in a year from now and see all the amazing innovation that people come up with.